Welcome everyone. What a beautiful evening we have here tonight. I'm Lily, and this is Background Interview, where we bring together fascinating minds from across time and space to share their stories. We invite legendary figures, historical giants, mythical beings, fictional characters, even abstract concepts to sit down for intimate conversations. Whether you're commuting, doing household chores, working, or winding down for sleep, this podcast is designed to enrich your mind while you multitask. We broadcast in multiple languages, reaching curious souls around the globe. Yes, that includes you too. How's everyone feeling tonight? Ready for some mind-bending revelations? I was organizing my bookshelf yesterday and came across my old psychology textbooks. Thick, intimidating volumes that used to give me nightmares in college. But here's the thing about nightmares. They might just be trying to tell us something profound about ourselves, don't you think? Speaking of dreams and the mysteries of the mind, tonight we have someone truly extraordinary with us. A man who dared to peek behind the curtain of human consciousness, who gave us words like unconscious, repression, and yes, that famous complex named after a certain Greek king. He's the architect of psychoanalysis, a revolutionary who suggested that we're all strangers to ourselves in the most fascinating ways possible.
Good evening. It's quite remarkable to find myself here, in this peculiar temporal arrangement you've constructed.
Please, both of us, let's get comfortable. These chairs look inviting enough, though I suspect our guest might have some theories about furniture arrangements and what they reveal about our psyche.
I am Sigmund Freud, and I must say, the irony is not lost on me that I'm here to discuss the unconscious mind in what appears to be a very conscious, deliberate conversation.
Dr. Freud, I have to ask, when you first developed your theories, did you ever imagine that one day people would be lying on therapists' couches saying things like, "My mother always said I was special, and now I have trust issues with my barista"? But in all seriousness, you fundamentally changed how we understand ourselves. Tell me, what was it like growing up in that quiet corner of Austria that would eventually reshape the entire world's understanding of the human psyche?
Freiberg in Moravia. Though we moved to Vienna when I was very young. You speak of quiet, but the mind of a child is never truly quiet, is it? Even then, I was observing, questioning. My family dynamics were complex, shall we say.
Complex family dynamics from the man who gave us the Oedipus complex. There's something beautifully meta about that.
Indeed, my father Jacob was already in his 40s when I was born, and my mother Amalia was barely 20. I had half-brothers older than my mother. If that doesn't provide fertile ground for understanding the labyrinthine nature of family relationships, I don't know what does.
That's such a vivid family constellation. It makes me think about how our earliest experiences shape everything that follows. You were drawn to language and observation from an early age, weren't you?
Language was my first love. Before medicine, before psychology, I devoured books, learned multiple languages. There's something profound about how words can reveal what we're trying to hide, even from ourselves. A slip of the tongue isn't just a mistake, it's a revelation.
Ah, yes, the famous Freudian slip. Though I have to say, in today's age of autocorrect, we blame technology more than our unconscious minds.
Technology merely provides new masks for the same ancient dramas. The unconscious finds its way to expression regardless of the medium.
You started in neurology, studying the physical brain. What made you turn toward the invisible realm of the psyche?
The brain, for all its fascinating complexity, couldn't explain why a perfectly healthy person might suddenly lose the ability to walk, or why memories could vanish and return like ghosts. The answers weren't in the tissue samples or anatomical drawings. They were hidden deeper, in territories that science had barely begun to map.
That transition from the concrete to the abstract must have been quite a leap of faith for someone trained in the rigorous methods of medicine.
Faith? No, my dear, it was observation. When you see a young woman paralyzed by memories she cannot consciously access, when you witness the power of the mind to create physical symptoms from emotional wounds, that's not mysticism. That's evidence demanding explanation.
And that led you to hypnosis, didn't it? Your first glimpse into what you'd later call the unconscious?
Working with Charcot in Paris, then with Breuer in Vienna, hypnosis was like discovering a hidden door in a familiar room. Suddenly, patients could access memories, emotions, experiences that their waking minds had buried. But hypnosis was merely the doorway. What lay beyond was far more fascinating.
I love that metaphor of the hidden door. Because you didn't just walk through it, you mapped the entire landscape on the other side, didn't you?
The unconscious mind is not simply a basement where we store unwanted furniture. It's a dynamic, complex system, with its own logic, its own language. Dreams became my royal road to understanding this realm.
The interpretation of dreams, your masterwork. What was it like writing that book, essentially creating an entirely new way of understanding human consciousness?
Writing it was like performing surgery on myself. Every dream I analyzed, including my own, revealed layers of meaning that were both deeply personal and universally human. The manifest content, what we remember of our dreams, is merely the tip of the iceberg.
And beneath that tip,
the latent content, the real story. Dreams are the mind's way of fulfilling wishes that our conscious selves cannot or dare not acknowledge. But the unconscious is clever. It disguises these wishes through condensation, displacement, symbolization.
For our listeners who might be puzzling over their own strange dreams, can you give us a simple example of how this dream work operates?
Consider a dream where you're late for an examination. On the surface, it might seem like anxiety about performance. But look deeper. Perhaps the examination represents a fear of being truly seen, truly known. The lateness might symbolize a wish to avoid that scrutiny altogether.
That's fascinating. So our dreams are basically our unconscious minds being incredibly creative screenwriters, crafting elaborate metaphors for things we can't face directly?
Precisely. And this same mechanism operates in waking life through what I term defense mechanisms. The psyche protects itself from unbearable truths through repression, denial, projection, rationalization.
Now we're getting into the architecture of the mind itself. You famously divided the psyche into conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. Can you walk us through this landscape?
Think of consciousness as the surface of an iceberg, what's visible above water. The preconscious is just below the surface, memories and thoughts that can be brought to awareness with effort. But the vast bulk of the iceberg, hidden beneath the waves, that's the unconscious. Primordial, powerful, operating by its own rules.
And later you gave us another model, id, ego, and superego. These sound almost like different characters living inside our heads.
They are, in a sense. The id is our most primitive self, pure desire, demanding immediate gratification. I want, therefore I must have. The superego is our internalized moral authority, often harsh and unforgiving. You should be ashamed of even thinking that.
And the ego?
The ego is the mediator, the diplomat caught between these two demanding masters, while also dealing with external reality. I want this, but I know I shouldn't, and besides, it's not practical right now, so let me find a compromise that won't destroy me.
That sounds exhausting. No wonder we need defense mechanisms.
The human psyche is indeed a battlefield, and at the center of these conflicts is what I called libido, not merely sexual energy, as many misunderstand, but the fundamental life force, the energy that drives all human behavior.
This brings us to what might be your most controversial theory, the centrality of sexuality in human development. You suggested that even infants have a kind of sexuality.
I spoke of psychosexual development because I observed that human beings seek pleasure and avoid pain from the moment of birth. The infant's relationship with the mother's breast, the toddler's relationship with bodily functions, the child's growing awareness of anatomical differences. These are not merely biological processes but psychological ones that shape personality.
The famous stages: oral, anal, phallic, latent, genital. These terms probably make some of our listeners uncomfortable even today.
Discomfort often signals proximity to truth. The oral stage is about trust and dependency. The anal stage, about control and autonomy. The phallic stage brings the child face to face with complex family dynamics, competition, and identification.
And that's where we encounter the Oedipus complex, isn't it? Your theory that children go through a phase of romantic attachment to the opposite-sex parent and rivalry with the same-sex parent.
The Oedipus complex is the nuclear complex of all neuroses. It's not about literal desire, but about the child's first encounter with the fundamental structure of civilization, authority, rules, the reality that we cannot have everything we want.
You drew this from Sophocles, ancient Greek tragedy, but you saw it as a universal human pattern. How did you make that leap from literature to psychology?
Great literature endures because it captures universal truths about human nature. Oedipus unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother, then blinds himself when he discovers the truth. This myth resonates because it dramatizes the unconscious wishes and fears that every child experiences.
And you extended this analysis to culture itself, didn't you? Looking at how entire civilizations deal with these same fundamental conflicts?
In Totem and Taboo, I explored how primitive societies create rules and rituals to manage the same impulses that individual psychology must handle. The taboo against incest, the worship of totemic ancestors, these are cultural solutions to universal psychological problems.
This connects to your later work on the death drive, doesn't it? The idea that we're not just driven by life-affirming forces, but also by destructive ones?
Eros and Thanatos, the life instinct and the death instinct. I observed that people often repeat destructive patterns, seek out suffering, engage in self-sabotage. There seemed to be something in human nature that resists pure happiness, that's drawn toward dissolution.
That's a rather dark view of human nature. What led you to this conclusion?
The Great War showed me the full scope of human destructiveness. But even before that, in my clinical work, I saw how people cling to their symptoms, resist healing, return again and again to what harms them. The repetition compulsion suggests something beyond the pleasure principle.
Speaking of your clinical work, you revolutionized therapy itself with the talking cure, the analytic couch, the concepts of transference and resistance.
The analytic setting creates a unique space where the unconscious can emerge safely. The patient lies down, cannot see the analyst, and is encouraged to say whatever comes to mind. In this artificial situation, real psychological truths begin to surface.
And transference, where patients unconsciously relate to their therapist as if they were important figures from their past.
Transference is the laboratory of psychoanalysis. When a patient begins treating me as if I were their stern father or their abandoning mother, we have access to the living drama of their unconscious conflicts. The past becomes present, and therefore changeable.
But therapy isn't just about individual healing, is it? You also wrote about group psychology, about how people behave differently in crowds.
The individual in a group regresses to a more primitive psychological state. The group provides an external superego in the form of a leader, allowing individuals to abandon their own moral constraints. This explains how otherwise civilized people can participate in mob violence or mass hysteria.
That seems terrifyingly relevant to our current political climate. You also wrote extensively about religion, calling it an illusion. That must have been controversial.
Religion serves important psychological functions. It provides comfort in the face of helplessness, meaning in the face of chaos, community in the face of isolation. But yes, I argued that it's ultimately a collective neurosis, a way of avoiding the painful truths of human existence.
In Civilization and Its Discontents, you explored the tension between individual desires and social demands. Do you think civilization inevitably makes us unhappy?
Civilization requires us to sublimate our primitive impulses, to channel sexual and aggressive energies into socially acceptable activities. Art, science, religion, work, these are all sublimations. But this process creates inevitable discontent. We trade instinctual satisfaction for security and meaning.
So happiness is impossible?
Complete happiness is indeed impossible. But psychoanalysis can help transform neurotic misery into common unhappiness. That may sound modest, but it's actually quite radical, to accept the human condition rather than fleeing from it.
Your work influenced not just psychology, but art, literature, philosophy. How do you feel about your ideas spreading so far beyond the consulting room?
Ideas have their own life force. Artists understood the unconscious long before I gave it a name. Writers like Dostoevsky and Shakespeare were natural psychologists. I merely provided a systematic way of understanding what they intuitively grasped.
But you also had famous disagreements with former disciples like Jung and Adler. What was it like to see your movement fracture?
Painful, but perhaps inevitable. Jung wanted to spiritualize psychoanalysis, to make the unconscious mystical rather than scientific. Adler emphasized social factors over sexual ones. These weren't merely theoretical differences, but fundamental disagreements about human nature.
And what about your theories about women? You're often criticized for concepts like penis envy.
I admit that the psychology of women remains something of a dark continent for me. My theories were necessarily limited by my historical context and personal experience. But I would argue that the fundamental mechanisms I described, repression, sublimation, the unconscious, operate in all human beings regardless of gender.
Your daughter Anna carried on your work, particularly with children. How did it feel to see your ideas evolve through the next generation?
Anna proved that psychoanalytic principles could illuminate child development in ways I had only begun to explore. Children, being closer to their unconscious processes, often demonstrate psychological mechanisms with startling clarity.
Dr. Freud, as we think about your legacy and how your ideas continue to influence us today, from therapy to pop culture to how we understand ourselves, what do you think would surprise you most about how your work has evolved?
Perhaps that the fundamental insights have proven so durable, while the specific mechanisms continue to be refined. The unconscious, repression, the importance of early childhood experiences, the role of sexuality and aggression in human motivation. These core insights remain valid, even as the theoretical superstructure has been modified.
Thank you so much for sharing these profound insights with us. There's something both unsettling and liberating about the idea that we're not fully in control of our own minds, that there are forces within us we barely understand. What was the most surprising revelation for you tonight, audience? The complexity of family dynamics? The idea that our dreams are wish fulfillment? Or perhaps the notion that civilization itself creates a kind of necessary unhappiness? You know, as I listen to Dr. Freud, I'm struck by how many of these concepts have become part of our everyday language. We talk about Freudian slips, being in denial, having a complex about something. It's remarkable how thoroughly these ideas have penetrated our culture.
Language shapes thought, and thought shapes reality. When we have words for psychological phenomena, we become capable of recognizing and potentially changing them.
Speaking of changing them, we have some wonderful questions from our viewers and listeners. Let's dive into those, shall we? First up, we have a question from Marcus Thompson in Seattle. Marcus writes, Dr. Freud, I keep having the same dream where I'm back in high school, unprepared for a final exam in a subject I never took. What could this possibly mean?
Marcus, you've described one of the most common dream scenarios. This is rarely about education itself. The school setting typically represents feelings of being judged or evaluated. The unprepared state suggests anxiety about adequacy, about whether you measure up to expectations, perhaps your own, perhaps others. The subject you never took is particularly interesting. What knowledge or experience do you feel you're lacking in your current life?
That's such a practical way to think about it. Dreams as messages from our unconscious about our current struggles. Next, we have what sounds like a personal dilemma from Sarah Chen in Vancouver. She writes, I find myself constantly seeking approval from authority figures, even when I know rationally that their opinions shouldn't matter so much to me. I'm 35 and successful, but I still feel like a child seeking parental approval. How do I break this pattern?
Sarah, your insight into your own pattern is already significant progress. What you're describing is transference in everyday life. You're unconsciously relating to authority figures as if they were your parents. This suggests that your relationship with parental authority in childhood left certain needs unmet. The child within you is still seeking that validation. Recognition is the first step toward freedom. When you catch yourself in this pattern, pause and ask, is this person really my parent? Am I really still that child who needed their approval to feel worthy?
It's powerful how awareness can be the beginning of change. Sometimes just naming what's happening can shift the dynamic. One more from our email bag. This one's from David Rodriguez in Mexico City. Dr. Freud, my teenage son seems to be rebelling against everything I stand for, and it's causing conflict in our family. Is this normal adolescent behavior, or should I be concerned?
David, what you're witnessing is likely a necessary and healthy developmental process. The adolescent must psychologically kill the father, symbolically of course, in order to become an individual. Your son isn't really rebelling against you personally, but against the internal parental authority he needs to overcome to establish his own identity. The more secure you can remain in yourself while allowing this process, the more likely he is to eventually incorporate your genuine values rather than your imposed ones.
That's such a compassionate way to understand family conflict. Thank you all for these thoughtful questions. Listening to these interactions reminds me how universal these struggles are. Thank you for your wisdom, Dr. Freud, and thank you to our amazing listeners for staying engaged. Now, I think our live audience might have some questions too. Anyone out there want to engage directly with the father of psychoanalysis himself? I see someone in the third row there. Yes, you with the blue sweater. Let me come down to you. There's something beautifully ironic about leaving the elevated stage to get closer to people when we're talking about unconscious hierarchies and authority relationships. All right, I've made my way over here. What's your name? Great to meet you, Jennifer. What would you like to ask Dr. Freud? Oh, that's a fascinating question. Jennifer is asking about creativity and whether psychological problems actually help or hinder artistic expression. Dr. Freud, she wants to know if therapy might make artists less creative by resolving their inner conflicts.
Jennifer poses a question that has long intrigued me. I would argue that neurosis doesn't create talent, but it may provide the emotional intensity that fuels artistic expression. However, the artist who understands their own psychological processes, through analysis or other means, gains greater access to their unconscious material, not less. True creativity comes from the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious processes, to give form to the formless. Therapy doesn't eliminate creativity, it can actually liberate it from the constraints of unexamined compulsions.
So self-awareness enhances rather than diminishes creative capacity. That's reassuring for all the artists in our audience. Anyone else? Yes, you in the front row, please. I'll head over this way. This is like a psychoanalytic house call. Very meta. Hi there, and your name is? Hello, Robert. What's your question for our distinguished guest? Robert is asking something really profound here. He wants to know if you think artificial intelligence could ever develop something analogous to an unconscious mind, and what that might mean for human uniqueness. Dr. Freud?
Robert, you've touched on something that would have seemed like pure fantasy in my time. If machines could truly replicate the complexity of human psychological processes, they would need not just computational power, but something like repression, something like conflict between different drives, something like the capacity for self-deception. The unconscious isn't simply hidden information. It's dynamically repressed material that actively shapes behavior. Could a machine develop the equivalent of shame, of unacceptable desires that must be pushed from awareness? These questions fascinate me, precisely because they illuminate what makes consciousness so remarkable.
The idea of an artificial unconscious that's either thrilling or terrifying, depending on your perspective. Okay, one final question. Let me see. You there, yes, with the red jacket. Coming your way. I should charge transportation fees for all this walking around, though I suppose the real journey tonight has been through the landscape of the human psyche. Hello? Your name, please? Nice to meet you, Patricia. What would you like to know? Patricia is asking about whether you believe people can truly change, or if we're doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. She says she feels stuck in cycles she recognizes, but can't seem to break. What hope can you offer, Dr. Freud?
Patricia, your awareness of the pattern is already a form of freedom. Yes, we are powerfully shaped by early experiences, by unconscious forces, by the structure of our psyche. But analysis, whether formal psychoanalysis or simply honest self-examination, can transform our relationship to these forces. We may not eliminate our complexes, but we can choose how to respond to them. The goal isn't perfection, but greater consciousness, greater choice. Where id was, their ego shall be. You have more power than you know.
What a beautiful note of hope to end on. Thank you, Patricia, and thank you to all our questioners for such thoughtful engagement. Let me make my way back to the stage.
Your audience demonstrates remarkable psychological sophistication. It gives me hope for the continued development of human consciousness.
High praise from the master himself. Dr. Freud, I'm curious, which of these questions resonated most deeply with you? Actually, let me turn that question to our audience, both here and listening at home. Which question sparked the strongest response in you? What made you think, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to know? You know what? I think we should test how well everyone's been paying attention. Dr. Freud, would you be up for a little quiz about yourself? Nothing too embarrassing, I promise.
I suppose I'm prepared to be psychoanalyzed by my own life story. Proceed.
Wonderful. Could we get some quiz music, please? All right, here's our first question, and I want everyone to participate. Raise your hand if you think the statement is true. Keep it down if you think it's false. Ready? Sigmund Freud was afraid of the number 62 and believed he would die at that age. Show me your answers. Interesting. I see the audience is pretty evenly split. Slightly more hands up than down, but it's close. Dr. Freud, what's the truth?
I'm afraid those who raised their hands are correct. I suffered from what I recognized as an irrational superstition about numbers, particularly convinced that I would die at age 62. This neurosis persisted, despite my rational understanding of its absurdity. I lived well beyond that age, dying at 83. Even psychoanalysts are not immune to the very phenomena we study.
Fascinating. The founder of Psychoanalysis had his own neurotic symptoms. There's something beautifully human about that. Second question. True or false? Freud's famous psychoanalytic couch was actually a gift from a grateful patient. Hands up for true, down for false. Oh, this time most hands are up. The audience is confident. Dr. Freud?
Correct again. The couch was indeed a gift from Madame Benvenisti, a patient from my early days. It was covered with an oriental rug and pillows, creating an atmosphere quite different from the sterile medical environments of the time. The couch became integral to the analytic process. Patients could speak more freely when not making direct eye contact with the analyst.
So the most famous piece of furniture in psychology started as a thank you gift. I love that. By the way, I got both of those right too. Of course I did. I wrote the questions myself. Thank you so much for being such good sports with our little quiz, Dr. Freud. It's been absolutely illuminating. You know, I hate to say this, but we're approaching the end of our time together tonight.
The audience's displeasure at endings. There's something beautiful about their resistance to closure. Perhaps they're expressing the universal wish to avoid the finality that endings represent.
Even our goodbyes become psychological insights. Dr. Freud, as we reflect on this evening's journey through the landscapes of the unconscious mind, What strikes you most about sharing these ideas in this format?
What fascinates me is how naturally these concepts translate to a conversational setting. The unconscious doesn't require academic jargon to be understood. It requires honesty about the complexity of human experience. Tonight we've spoken about dreams, desires, defenses, development. But really, we've been talking about the eternal human question. Who are we, really, beneath the stories we tell ourselves?
And that question seems more relevant than ever in our age of social media and constant self-presentation. Thank you, Dr. Freud, for helping us peer behind those presentations to the deeper truths of human nature.
The pleasure has been entirely mine, to engage with minds hungry for understanding, to participate in the ongoing conversation about consciousness. This is what the intellectual life is for.
Thank you for your wisdom, your insights, and your willingness to explore these profound questions with us.
And thank you, Lily, and this remarkable audience, for proving that the human desire to understand itself remains as powerful today as it was in my Vienna consulting room. The conversation continues. Until we meet again in the realm of ideas, I bid you farewell.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sigmund Freud. What an extraordinary mind, what an extraordinary evening. And thank you to our incredible audience here in the studio and to everyone listening while commuting, working, relaxing, or drifting off to sleep. Tell me, what was the single most memorable moment from tonight's conversation? Was it learning about the three-part structure of the psyche, the revelation that dreams are wish fulfillment, or perhaps the idea that we're all engaged in an ongoing negotiation between our desires and civilization's demands? Before we close, it's time for our featured quote of the evening. Could we have some music for our quote segment, please? Tonight's quote is this one. The interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. Again, the interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. This quote captures the essence of Freud's revolutionary approach to understanding human psychology. He believed that our sleeping minds, freed from the constraints of rational thought, reveal truths about ourselves that we cannot access during waking hours. Dreams became his primary tool for exploring the vast, hidden territories of human consciousness. I think about this quote every time I wake up from a particularly vivid or strange dream. Instead of dismissing it as random neural firing, Freud would have us ask, what is my unconscious mind trying to tell me? What wishes, fears, or conflicts am I not facing in my waking life? It's like having a direct line to parts of ourselves we didn't even know existed. Which is why I'm still trying to figure out why my last dream involved a penguin, my high school math teacher, and a suspiciously large jar of mayonnaise. What do you think about tonight's quote? Does it change how you might think about your own dreams going forward? And now, truly, we've reached the end of our exploration together. Thank you so much for staying with us through this fascinating journey into the human psyche. If you enjoyed tonight's conversation, please subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments who you'd like to see interviewed next. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these remarkable minds together for these deep, enriching conversations. As mentioned in our description, we have many other episodes in this series featuring equally fascinating guests from across history, literature, and human imagination. Each conversation offers its own unique insights and discoveries. And if you'd like to support our work, you can find donation links in the description below or scan the QR code in the corner of your screen. Your contributions help us keep producing these conversations. Plus, that's where my salary comes from too. This interview, like all our episodes, is designed for multitasking, perfect for commutes, household chores, work sessions, or even as a soothing presence for those who find comfort in thoughtful conversation before sleep. I have to admit, I sometimes listen to our own episodes when I need company, or when I'm looking for that perfect balance of intellectual stimulation and relaxation. Tonight's conversation about the unconscious mind might even influence your dreams. Wouldn't that be deliciously ironic? Our next guest is another world-renowned figure whose ideas continue to shape how we understand ourselves and our world. I won't reveal who it is just yet, but I promise you won't want to miss it. Until then, you can explore our other episodes through the links in the description. Each one offers its own journey of discovery and insight. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and I'll see you next time on Background Interview. Good night, everyone. Phew, that was intense. I mean, trying to keep up with Freud's mind, it's like mental gymnastics. You know what I really wanted to ask him but didn't get the chance? I was so curious about his relationship with his own dreams, especially the famous Irma's injection dream that he analyzed in such detail in his book. There was something about the way he talked about dreams tonight that made me think he was holding back some deeply personal insights. I was probably too intimidated to push deeper. The man has this way of making you feel like he can see right through to your unconscious motivations. But I hope someday I'll get another chance to explore those deeper waters with him. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of your own minds.